Welcome back, listeners, to the Mindful Journey podcast. I'm your host, Sana. Now, today we are leaning into a topic that, it can feel very personal, very raw, actually: calling and faith. For some of us, faith is the air that we breathe. For others, it's something we walked away from a long time ago. Maybe you are listening right now because you are in a season where nothing makes sense for you. Maybe you are questioning everything that you used to believe. Or maybe you are just curious about how someone finds a purpose when life has not exactly played fair. Listeners, my guest today is a young man who did not grow up trusting God at all. His childhood was rough. Faith felt distant, maybe even fake. Then life threw him into some very real struggles. In the middle of all that, he began to have experiences he could not ignore. Over time, he went from not believing in God to feeling called into ministry. So much so that he's now studying religious studies and working toward a Master of Divinity. So today, we are not here to sell you a belief system, listener. We are here to explore one person's story. How do you go from pain to purpose, from distress to calling, from where is God to I want to give my life to this? So take a breath, notice what comes up in your body as you listen. Maybe resistance, curiosity, maybe a bit of both, because all of that is welcome here. So, Pastor Alex Horton, welcome to the Mindful Journey, and it's really an honor to have you here with us.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Pastor Horton, let's go back to your childhood. What made you feel like God was either not real or not trustworthy in the first place?
Yeah. So throughout my childhood, like you said, I had it really rough. I was bullied a lot,
Mm,
um, made to feel like I was nothing and nobody who would never go anywhere in life.
mm,
And while I was raised in or around the church, I just couldn't imagine that a God who supposedly loved me would also allow all of this negativity to happen to me. So I fell away from that faith quite a bit.
mm, mm. No, it does make sense. It does make sense, because um sometimes in fact our brain or our inner self, it would, kind of question that if God is there, if God says that, everything will be good with you, I'll be there with you, then also why everything is happening bad to me. It's kind of irrational that, it is in us. Um, and uh, when you look at that younger version of yourself now, uh, now when you think about this, do you feel more anger or more compassion or more confusion toward him? And like, why?
Well, I'm actually quite grateful. Um, and that may sound very contradictory,
Mm,
but the reason for that is all of the pain and the suffering that I felt during that time, it equipped me. If I had never gone through any of that, I wouldn't understand what it was like to go through that. And a lot of my ministry focuses on today's youth. And so I've gone through things that a lot of kids go through. And because of that, I am able to better minister to them. So while what I went through was never good, I never want somebody to go through that. It
mm.
did equip me to better assist others.
Currently. And I think this is very honest. First of all, I really appreciate that you are open about this, because a lot of people listening, they um, they may have felt the same thing, but they were never allowed to say it out loud, especially if they grew up in religious homes. Because once you put words to it, like, I did not trust God because life felt unsafe, unfair. It really, it starts to make sense. Not as a failure of faith, but I believe, like a biological way, as a nervous system trying to survive.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. And I think this is very important for all of our listeners, for all of you to catch, because if your heart shut down at some point, it did that to protect you. So the question becomes, what helped you start to slowly open it again? So with that, Pastor Alex, okay, this is very interesting. Let's talk about the turning point. You mentioned you had some real experiences with God that you could not ignore. For all of our listeners, can you walk us through one specific moment, or maybe more than one, where you thought, okay, something bigger is happening here?
Yeah. So one of the situations that I will always claim as the most impactful for myself was throughout my younger years, and
Mm.
even in more recent years, I struggled with mental health issues to the
Okay.
point where I, on a few occasions, wanted to take my own life.
Okay.
One of these occasions I will always claim as God working. For some context, I had a cat for about 9 years that I considered to be my absolute best friend. He was
Mm-hmm.
a brother to me, and he passed. And this happened a few months after that, where I was laying in bed in tears. I mean, very emotional, just sobbing, apologizing to everybody that I knew who might miss me, because I was prepared to take my life. And all of a sudden, I felt my cat jump onto my bed and curl up next to me, and I felt that warmth and a sense of calm fall over me. And I went to reach out to pet him, and there was nothing there, and I remembered he had died. I mean, this was 4 months prior, and I was just shocked, but this sense of calm that fell over me, it allowed me to fall asleep, and the next morning I woke up, and I was just incredibly thankful that I did wake up, but I was also so confused. I mean, I had no explanation, and at that point, I didn't attribute it to being God, but now, absolutely it was.
Mm. I mean, many people will have different thoughts or opinions about this, but I think there are some experiences where even personally I wouldn't, kind of, because I also sometimes find it very skeptical around, maybe miracles or something which cannot be logically or scientifically explained. But I think there are still some experiences where maybe it's, challenging for us to find the answers. And I think let them mean that way, because in that way, we can at least cherish the beauty of those moments or those happenings. And they do leave such a huge mark, within us. And I think that also sparks the curiosity within us. So I'm really glad, Pastor Alex, that you shared that with us.
Yeah. It was just a super impactful time of my life, and like you said, there's no real explanation for it that's scientific. It's only faith. I mean, it's the only way that I can explain it even to this day.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that. Beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful. Um, and um, you know, you are now studying religious studies, and you're also working toward a Master of Divinity. So, when you say you feel called, what does that actually mean in real life? Like, is it a voice within you, or maybe a pull, or maybe a decision that you keep making? Like, it's your only purpose right now.
Yeah. So, that's a really good question. And I think that
Mhm.
different people will feel differently when they are called to do something. For
Mhm.
me, I didn't hear a voice telling me to do it. I was studying cybersecurity, which I thought, that'll be fine. It'll get me money. It'll pay the bills, whatever. It will provide for me.
Okay.
But then I started researching more into the Bible and more into faith. And, you know, it all it all changed everything. Instead
Mhm.
of the feeling of, well, this will provide for, whatever family I end up having, whatever.
Mhm.
Instead, I was completely engrossed in these topics. I was enthralled. I wanted to keep learning more and more. And after I learned enough to have a conversation about it, I wanted
Mhm.
to share it with people. And
Mhm.
that's kind of when I knew I was being called to be a pastor because I went from focused on worldly things like money to
Mhm.
I I know that I will never get as much out of a job as I will when I share the word of God with others. And that was my call, was just this intense passion and drive to keep doing it.
Mhm. 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 But I would still agree, Pastor Alex, that because there's this kind of I wouldn't say misconception, but it's kind of a never-ending kind of a debate, or excuse me, argument, that if I do something which may not help me pay my bills or help me survive or have at least a respectable, good standard of living, why would I pursue that? And then at the same time, I should be very super high ambitious, um, practical, always logical or scientific. I mean, there's this a huge dilemma that I think many of us we do have at some point of time in our lives. So, how do you think, especially for the younger generation today, um, where do we find that balance between faith, way of living, and also, um, putting our efforts into something which can practically help us live a good life, as well as it can also kind of, help in build our character. Like, is that balance possible to achieve?
Absolutely. And here's why. When we take something on in our lives,
Mhm.
sorry. When we take something on in our lives, there are two ways of thinking about it. Those being, will this help me survive? And will this help me live? And there is a difference between the two. Survival, that is food, water, shelter, clothes, things
Mhm.
that allow you to keep being alive. And
Mhm.
that is absolutely a very important thing to think about. That's where our money comes in. That's where our house comes in. That's where a lot of our time goes. But when it comes to living, that is where the more spiritual side comes in. That's where we start thinking about, our relationship with God, our mental health, our happiness, joy, service to others. And so, if you can find a job or a career that allows you to survive, that's fine, right? We all need to survive.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
if we can find a career that allows us to live, that is the ultimate goal. For me, that looks like a job where I won't make as much money. Pastors generally do not do it for the money. And so I likely will not be making a whole lot of money in this career, but I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it to help lead others to God. And,
Mm,
somebody else may go into cybersecurity like I was going to. And that's much better for money. All they have to do is be good stewards of that money because that money is given to us by God, right?
mm,
God allows us the circumstances to become whatever we do become and to have what we have. And so when
mm,
you get that money, you have to be a good steward of it. The other thing is a steward of our time. If I have a job where I am completely alone, I never get to help serve others. What I should do at that point is volunteer and find a way to serve others. In my current job, I work security at a
mm,
building, and I don't get the chance to minister to others very often. Instead, what I do is after work, 3 days a week, I go to my church and I serve. I help with the youth ministry. I serve the middle school and the high school groups,
mm,
as well as a young adult group that I help lead. And so, even though my job doesn't allow me to minister much, I find a way to because that's one of the most important things that we can do is to minister to others. I also set up my whole ministry, my whole online ministry, so that I could reach others. And that does take away from my personal time. I've had people say, "Oh, you have so much on your plate. Why would you
mm,
add something else?" And I tell them because I have never felt more alive than I do now. I have
mm.
everything on my plate, but I know that I'm helping people find salvation. And that is the most rewarding thing that I could ever know.
That's such a beautiful way to put it. Yeah, I can totally, absolutely understand that, Pastor Alex. I have seen multiple, examples said by people who are actually um, working their day job and in the time that they have got, and it's not about that. Um, I'm putting everything at risk, maybe my own time or time with my family or loved ones, or I'm sacrificing my well being. But whatever they're doing, they are finding fulfillment, they are finding joy and peace in doing that. And also, I mean, there are so many ways that, they're able to actually help people with problems in their respective industries or segments or serve in multiple ways. So I think that is actually, um, it's not just from the typical lens of faith or spirituality, but I think it is also a practical take.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay, okay, this is something, let's say, Pastor Alex, if tomorrow everything collapsed, maybe your plans changed, your degree did not work out, do you still feel you would be called, or is your calling tied to that exact path?
Um, I would always try to be a pastor, right? I think that that is where my skills are best put to use. However, if God changes the path that I'm on, right? If he changes it so I would no longer be a pastor, I wouldn't fight that. I would just try to find a way that I can serve others however possible. And if that means through my own ministry, if that means through a different job, it doesn't really matter.
Mm,
However, I am called to serve, I will serve. To, kind of paraphrase Jesus, not my will, but his. I have a plan. I plan to become a pastor. But if that's not his will, let his will be done.
Mm. I totally agree with it. And I think the vision will still remain the same, even if it's through some other path or some other, maybe career or anything else. The vision will still remain intact for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, my goal at the end of the day is to change one person's life. And even if all that means is smiling at them and making them or making their day just a little bit better, I have succeeded. I aim to show the love of God to at least one person per day. And it's as simple as that. I don't have to be a pastor to do that. I don't have to be in a church to do that. All I have to do is remember that God loves me and God sacrificed so much for me. And my entire purpose is to show that same love to others so that they can be saved as well.
Amazing. That's really, I really appreciate that. Um, okay. You know, Going back to your journey, I mean, you have been through a lot of issues in life. You mentioned about bullying in childhood, and you also talk about trials as part of your journey to faith. Um, how do you make sure you are not romanticizing suffering or saying that, pain is good or necessary just because it led you to God?
Well, um, while I hope nobody ever goes through pain,
Mm,
especially the
mm,
same stuff that I went through, it is
mm,
necessary. Um, so part of the thing is the trials that I went through equipped me to better serve. I went through mental health issues so that I could better serve to those dealing with mental health issues. I was bullied, and I believe that was so that I could better minister to people who were bullied. And I mean, it is difficult to see pain and suffering as something that's good, but we have to remember that A, it equips us for the future. Um, and it gives us that sense of community when others help us. And
mm,
B, any suffering that we go through on earth, our reward in heaven will be great because of that. So no matter what happens, we will be rewarded, even if it's a terrible, terrible struggle that we have to go through. But it is difficult to hear somebody say, what you're going through now will be worth it. That's never something that I wanted to hear. It's just something that I had to learn.
mm. Yeah, it makes sense. I think sometimes to appreciate or to, in fact, to realize the abundance of something, we do need to understand or experience the scarcity as well. And I think it you know I also hope that no one has to go through any suffering or pain or lot of trials and tribulations. However, it doesn't also discount the fact that you know um we have to be thankful for what where we are or what we are. We have got our home, our house, maybe a loving family, loving friends, good education, good health. We are able to have food. Um, yes, all these basic need for survival. So yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the most important things to remember too is that others may not have what we have.
Mm,
It was just American Thanksgiving, and that's a time of gratitude and
mm,
Thanksgiving.
yeah.
Um, and this year, being in the ministry role that I am, I took a look at it from a different perspective. I always looked at it as, oh, well, I have all of these things and I am fortunate to. And instead, this year, I looked at God has provided me with so much, and I am so grateful for that. But also, there are so many with so much less. And
Mm.
so what I did for that was, I prayed that they would know God's heart and that they would find God's message. And instead of being grateful for everything physical that I had, I prayed and I said, God, while I am extremely grateful for the food and the family and the friends and all of this, I'm more grateful that you sent your son to die so that my sins would be forgiven. Because that's the ultimate sacrifice right there is Jesus Christ died on the cross for all of us so that we could be saved. Otherwise, none of us would make it to heaven. And when I think about that, that right there is the most impactful thing that I could be grateful for.
And before we wrap up, Pastor Alex, because this exactly brings me to the next question that, especially for, um, I come from that particular time, when especially, as kids, we would have nothing at the access of our fingertips. We would have to put a lot of efforts to make sure that we put up something. Um, when we would have to go out and um, look out for different options, even to make a call to someone, send letters, and connect. But now we and the younger generations, everything is right now getting accessible, getting easier, and maybe somewhere down the line we may be feeling a um in that sense that okay, the whole world is with me, in front of me, so I've got that power. So we may not understand the value, because we haven't experienced the scarcity of it. So what's your message, especially to the younger generations who may be listening to this episode?
Well, my message to everybody is find God's love. There's so much on the internet and around the world that you can find. And I would like to say, before I forget, you keep talking about this scarcity, and it reminds
Mm,
me of one of my favorite quotes, which is
mm,
you can't appreciate the sunshine without the rain.
mm,
And if it was perpetually, forever sunny, you wouldn't appreciate it. You would start to wish for something else. So without that rain, those times when you miss it, when you miss the sunshine, you wouldn't appreciate it. Um, but there's so much around the internet, and there's a lot of evil. There's a lot of fake. Um, and one of the things that you find a lot of is fake love. Real, true love. You can find it so many times through the Bible. You just have to look for it. When you find it, you know. And I'm not saying that the internet is all bad. I'm not saying you can't
yeah.
find love on the internet. But if you are looking to the internet for validation, for your identity, for any kind of, self-worth, if you're looking for just likes, oh, so sorry. Um, if you're only looking for that validation and that identity online, I'm sorry, but you're wrong because our identity is in Christ. Our worth was made by God when we were made in the image of God. And until you understand that your worth is not something given to you by the world, but by God. You will never truly understand your worth, your importance, or your place or purpose in life.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. So, if our listeners they would like to connect with you, Pastor Alex, what would be the easiest way?
Yeah, so I have a website for my ministry, which is theheartofwhatwebelieve.org or theheartofwhatwebelieve.com, or for a shorter version, it's thowb.org. That's the fastest way to find all of my materials, where you can find my devotionals, my reflections, my sermons, my interviews with people. I also have a book that's out on most major retailers. That's called From Wandering to Walking, A Testimony of God's Love. And that is my own personal memoir, my journey through faith, without faith and with faith, and where I am now. And that, like I said, can be found Amazon or any other major retailers of books. Um, Otherwise, I can be found on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all under Pastor Horton or Pastor_Horton.
Amazing. Listeners, as you all know, I do it every day for you, and this time also I'll have all these links in the show notes so that you can easily connect with Pastor Alex Horton. And also, as we wrap up, I think you do not have to, and I mean, this is for every one of you. You do not have to share um, his beliefs to learn from his courage. I think maybe your childhood was chaotic. Maybe you stopped trusting God, people, yourself, all of the above. Maybe you are not still sure what you believe. That is okay. What I hope you take from this conversation is simple. Your story is not over. Your journey is not over. Your questions do not disqualify you from growth. Your pain does not define your future. Whether you find God, find therapy, find community, or find some mix of all these, you deserve to move toward life that feels more honest and more whole. So, Pastor Alex, thank you so much for bringing your full story here. Um, the difficult parts, the good parts, the parts that feel redeemed, and very much in progress. So, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So, thank you to all the listeners for devoting your time to listen to this episode on the mindful journey. If today's episode connected with you, sit with it. Maybe you journal or talk to a loved one you trust or reach out for support. You do not have to navigate this alone. You are not alone. Until then, this has been the mindful journey with me, Sana. Thank you and take care of your mind, guard your heart, and stay curious about your own story. Thank you.